Good evening. We are starting this meeting, but we're actually not starting the meeting yet. We're going to give a few minutes for our attendee to come and for some more members of our committee to come. This is the October meeting of the Human Services Committee of Community Board 2 Manhattan. So I will mute myself and we will sit. Oh, there's Carter. Oh, great. We have some people already here. How nice. Carter Booth from Community Board 2, Dan Siegler, and Nicole Bart. We are waiting for Jamie Nichols from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and we're waiting for a few people from our committee. So I'm going to mute and give it a couple of minutes. Thanks for being here. Okay. Jamie Nichols, I am promoting you to, oh, there you are, promoting you to panelist.
Okay. Sometimes I do that.
We are going to start in just a couple of minutes. I'm waiting for one more committee member to join us. I'm going to mute for a second. Hi, Jamie. For some reason, I wrote down James, and I was expecting to see a male face.
That's fine. That's my father's name, so that's how I got this name.
Oh, it's nice. I'm just going to give it one more minute because one of our committee members is actually walking over to the subway from the subway, so we'll give him a minute to come here, and then we'll get going. Yes, go ahead.
Hear us?
Now she can.
Okay, your father was James? Is that right? Your father was, you can't,
She's muted, but
she can, all right.
she can hear
I
us.
just wanted,
Jamie, you can hear us, right? Nod if you can hear us.
can I make conversation?
Yes.
Okay, your father was James? And is that right?
She's muted.
She's muted, but that's all right. Eventually you'll have to unmute yourself, Jamie. Let's see if I can unmute you. I can ask you to unmute. How does that work?
Here we go.
There you go. Oh, now? Okay, sorry.
Single click.
There we go. I was in the meeting twice. Sorry, I was trying to get myself out when I moved from a panelist or attendee to panelist, I think.
We're
Do you hear
good.
me right now without an echo?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're a
Yes.
panelist and we're all good. And as soon as our colleague Arturo shows up, we will start. And
Okay.
But I wanted to know how you got the name Jamie.
And it's because my father is James and my birthday was around his birthday. But also my brother is James. So a lot of us in our family have the same name. It was, pretty unoriginal.
What, your parents have no imagination, is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Mike Tyson, every one of his children's named Mike.
yeah,
Yeah.
George
All the
Foreman.
kids
I
were
think it was
George
George
Foreman.
Foreman. His kids are named George.
That is,
Funny.
that's funny, because, when I was pregnant, we spent a lot of time, many hours. on what to name this child, and got many opinions. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, I don't really need to look at this. I need to look at this. You know what I think we will
We should
do?
get going.
Arturo is walking over, but it's 6:37, so let's get going and we will start with introductions. Welcome to everyone. I see we have 5 attendees and we have some members of Community Board 2 not in our committee. Also joining us and Nicole Barth from Councilmember Eric Bosch's office. Excuse me.
Yes.
And here's Arturo. This is the October meeting of the Human Services Committee of Manhattan Community Board 2. I am Susanna Aaron, I'm the chair. Keen,
I'm Keen Berger, I'm a member of the committee.
Arturo,
Fernandez, member.
Janet Smith, member.
Rachel Yarmolinsky, public member.
great, and we are missing Mr. Chatri, who's our vice chair. Don't have a quorum tonight, so this is primarily an information session, but we really wanted to talk about intensive mobile treatment. There are very few of us in this meeting, so it's not going to be very formal. Everyone can jump in when they want to. I'm just going to launch it and then we can see how it goes. So my main interest in talking to you, Jamie, and you're muted again, is IMT. So a year and a half ago, we had a meeting about SMI, serious mental illness. We did this with a couple of other community boards. And the reason we did this is because we are all experiencing the issues that we see every day in Washington Square Park and nearby. And we know there's this confluence of substance use and homelessness and serious mental illness. So we talked about various approaches. We had a panel of providers and so on, and we talked about various approaches. And we were very interested in intensive mobile treatment, in IMT, a city program. I know there's a state equivalent of it to it. And the reason it seemed like a smart idea is because building an IMT team is about $1.5 million. It seemed like something that's pretty flexible. You don't have to have a building. You can build it if you need it. You can shrink it if you don't need it. And there's this individual attention, maximum of 27 clients per team, et cetera. So we advocated for it in our budget requests, and we put it into our statement of needs both for FY25 and just now for FY26. However, in the interim, you are aware, I'm sure, that the controller, the city controller, Brad Lander, did an audit of IMT, which raised some questions and some recommendations. Some questions about its effectiveness and whether this money was well spent, and some recommendations about how it could be, the program could be better, made more efficacious, I suppose is the way of saying it. And according to the audit, DOHMH agreed with most of those recommendations. So my hope in this meeting is to talk a little bit about that. Like, what have you guys seen? Have you responded to the audit? Are you responding to the audit? Was the audit off base? That's what I'd like to know. So you need to unmute yourself. Have we introduced everybody? Yes, okay.
Sure. So thanks for that intro. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jamie Nichols. I'm with the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, based in Long Island City. where I've been working for 15 years, exclusively in the work that focuses on adults with serious mental illness. So this is my life's work. Now my responsibilities are, I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the Adult Mental Health Bureau, so that includes our contracts for mobile treatment services. So IMT is one of them. We also have a large portfolio of supportive housing. We are responsible for 988 and mobile crisis teams, as well as clubhouses and other psychosocial interventions, and some site-based clinic services too. So that's just to give you a sense of my universe. For many years, we had the sort of standard mobile treatment model in New York City, known as assertive community treatment. That's a national model, right? It's licensed in New York State by the Office of Mental Health. And that is the sort of, if and when clinic services doesn't work for somebody who has a serious mental illness and has a hard time getting to appointments, right? May not, may have some disorganization, right? And may benefit from essentially the clinic coming to them. We have assertive community treatment. So we have about 5,000 spots for that in New York City. And so we manage eligibility and connection to those services. We get a lot of referrals from hospitals as a part of discharge plans, also from homeless outreach teams and community providers. But the sort of general flow is as a person comes out of the hospital, they get connected to these services. And it was through that work, managing access to ACT and seeing the referrals from which, IMT emerged. In about 2015, 2016, we were noticing, right, there were referrals coming to us that for which often the situation was very unclear. The diagnosis was unclear. Maybe it was mental health, maybe it was substance induced, maybe there were developmental disabilities that were not diagnosed. Maybe there was a traumatic brain injury, right? Maybe, the person, has never been in one place long enough to have a full assessment. So there was a lot of, not a lot, but there was a substantial group of people for whom ACT, the traditional sort of mobile model, wasn't, either they weren't being found eligible for lack of, clear diagnostic information, or their situation was so fluid, in particular their living situation was so often changed. They were in, physically moving around the city, on the street, in shelters and safe havens, in the hospital and jail, right? There was a lot of movement that it was impossible for the ACT team to, they just didn't have enough resources to find and engage those folks. And so we developed this idea of intensive mobile treatment, right? A really generic name to capture this group of folks who we didn't know what was going on, and we wanted to be free from all the boxes and criteria that come along with a Medicaid reimbursable service and an OMH license service. And so we took a lot of the examples of that, but we kept it outside of that structure. And we were able to get enough city tax levy to pay for it completely, to serve 75 people. That was the initial program as a demonstration project. And in the first 3 years, we were really impressed with the work that the teams did to engage, form relationships, and begin to work with a group of people that in the past, it would be the kind of person and situation that providers would say, you know what, this is really important, right? But they're not a good fit for our program. Or this person could really use help, but they're not eligible. Or right, like this is just, they just kept getting bumped out of every program for all sorts of reasons. Also, they were folks very hard to serve, right? And so we said to the IMT providers, you're gonna keep this case open and you're gonna do whatever it takes to form a relationship with whoever we refer to you. And we're not gonna put an end date on that. We're going to be in your business, right? We're going to ask you lots of questions. We're going to help you out, remove barriers. And so we're going to have really, you know, close oversight. But we're not going to say like, you have to meet this target by this time. Because, or we're not going to say you need to see somebody this frequency for this duration, because we don't know what's going to work. But we do know that this group of people, they're getting referred to because they never stick with anything. Nobody sticks with them and they don't stick with anybody, right? There's been such disconnection and trauma usually that's related to that. So that was the starting point of the program. Small pilot, very intense oversight, but not a lot of, not a clear road, not a clear structure.
Yeah, very intentionally fluid, intentionally
Yes.
malleable.
Yep. So we were pleased with the results of the first 3-year pilot, that we were able to advocate for more funding. We got some more funding. I don't remember the exact numbers and timeline there, but we expanded maybe again another couple hundred slots, and it went well. And we sort of stuck with the we had a competitive procurement after the demonstration period, and then there was a burst of much more funding that came through just before the pandemic hit. So right at late 2019, beginning, I think January 2020, the health department got more funding to expand up to our current capacity, which is just shy of 1,000 people. I think it's 973 slots. So that money came to us in 2019, I guess that would be fiscal year 2020 for the city. Despite everything that was going on with the pandemic, we actually were able to expand dramatically up to this current number, and bring in some new providers as well, not just the initial group that had been with the pilot project and the initial expansion. So we've got,
my understanding is you guys have 5 different providers.
You know what? We've got probably more than that.
Okay, it's not, that doesn't really matter. And the audit anyway said that your budget for FY23 was, for FY24 was 42 million.
That could be true. Yeah, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but that doesn't sound outrageous. And so there was, from the period of 20, I'd say like 22, 23, we're in 24, there was rapid growth during the pandemic. And so a lot of as soon as those spots become open, they are full, right? It's not hard for us to fill them. And so there was a real cohort of new people coming into the program at once, with a bunch of new providers. And that also happens to be the period of time that the audit sort of was looking at. And so I don't want to sort of dive into the audit because I'm sure that'll be a landmine for me, that I don't want to, I want to be informative here with you and not, try to not be restrained necessarily in what I'm saying by trying to be careful about that process. But I think the timing, just that they were looking at, was for a period of a bunch of new programs opening up at once. And so I don't think they were able to see the best evaluation results, because what we've learned about the initial cohort, and are seeing now with the which was tiny, right? And now this much bigger new cohort, is that the progress is very incremental. And understandably so, given the very select number of people that we're sort of reserving this service for, and their histories, and trauma, and frankly the lack of perfect treatment out there for traumatic brain injury or SMI with co-occurring dual diagnosis, right? These are there's no easy answers to the array of challenges, and so what we do know is that we're going to form relationships, keep trying, keep showing up, keep the door open, right? And I sometimes say like the program's assignment is to love their clients, right? That to just unconditional, appropriate clinical care love, right? And the other goals, depending whatever they are, often it's housing, will take time to emerge. And so it's critical to give the providers time to form those relationships and to come up with creative solutions that will work for people that are really at the tail. Like if you're looking at a bell curve, like the folks that we're sending here are really at the tails of those curves, and so the standard options are not working for them.
Want to jump in? I mean, I have 5 million questions, but
Yeah, but I mean, I want to know, give me an example of exactly how it works. How do you find these people? And I mean, can you describe exactly what happens?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I can tell you how we find them. I'll start with that. So we we run what's called a single point of access at the health department, where we receive thousands of referrals a year from hospitals, inpatient psychiatric units that are looking to put together a discharge plan for somebody admitted to their hospital. So that's our single largest source of referrals. Mobile crisis teams that respond to referrals from 988. The Department of Homeless Services that operates both shelters and the street outreach teams will also make referrals to us. So those are the biggest, and I'm sorry, there's one more, correctional health services. So our jails health entity operated by New York City Health and Hospitals also has a really robust discharge planning process for people coming out of jail, returning to the community with a serious mental illness. They are also, completing an application to our single point of access where my staff are reviewing, histories, assessments, evaluations, right? And determining eligibility and then matching a person, right? Is this a person who should go to a shelter partnered ACT team? Is this a person who needs a forensic ACT team? Do they need, with a site-based clinic because they like social interaction, right? But they need a care coordinator to help them get there, right? They don't need the clinic to come to them, or IMT. So we're making those clinical determinations.
So they give you a name, and do you actually see how do you find the actual person?
So this is a very hard part. So we get a name and a referral application, right? It's based on a clinician somewhere is working with the person directly and is saying, based on this person's history, we're applying to this program, and if they're eligible, and then there's an available spot, we assign their case. So we take that whole referral package and we transmit it to a provider who is credentialed to provide that level of care, right? A contracted provider for us, for IMT, and they have a vacancy. And then our contract expectations for IMT have the expectations in terms of outreach by the provider to find and develop a relationship with that person, which may be simple if they are still in the hospital unit that referred them, which is our ideal pathway, which rarely happens. We never get our ideal pathway because there's just so much movement, right? And so people are out, right? Before, even if it only takes us, a day to review a packet, we don't have a long turnaround for the packet, just the timing from come to the hospital and then they're discharged. So there's a lot of footwork. There's a lot of, particularly for the IMT folks, because we're pulling from the folks that are so transient to begin with, there's a lot of time spent searching for people.
oh my God.
Calling collateral contacts, right? Shelters, outreach people, family members. People have networks more than we realize, even homeless folks. And so, check with the super in the building or the bodega owner that we know that sometimes, she does odd jobs with, and so there's a lot of creativity and just footwork to get out there and find the person if there's no intro. And the street outreach teams can be very helpful too, because right, a lot of people that if they're, you know, able to speak with a person, right, because they observe people who are, you know, bedded down in various places. If they have an opportunity to sort of talk to the person and get a rough sense for their need, and they're able to get a referral, then we'll partner with them to sort of say, oh, I know she sets up her encampment at this time of day or night, and they do whatever it takes.
Before you go on, you mentioned something that I just want to clarify for the purpose of the transcript. You said a 988, is that what you said, a 998?
So yeah, so 988 makes is the city's, you know, mental health crisis hotline. So they, you know, provide counseling over the phone. They can also connect people to a mobile crisis response team. And so sometimes those teams go out and assess a person and will say, oh, you know, this person, this isn't a time limited crisis. This is a really ongoing thing that we can't resolve in 1 or 2 visits, right? And so they can submit referrals to our through our system, and we can connect them as well.
So to me, I think, you know, and I don't do this for a living. So as an outsider, the approach that begins with compassion seems to be so humane, and I can so clearly understand why it is effective. But I do wonder, for example, to give your client unconditional love, how do you know if it's working for the client? Like, how do you measure progress? How do you decide? Maybe giving people love does nothing for their life. I mean, I'm just, you know, going to a logical extreme. How do you know that this approach, this program theory, works? How do you measure that?
Yeah, so that's a fundamental question, right? And so, so the typical healthcare measures don't work that great for this group. And so if your typical healthcare measures are like, you know, regularly filling a prescription, right? A prescribed, you know, antipsychotic, or hospital readmissions, right? Within a certain period of time. But if you have a group where, you know, this person has been living deep in the woods of New York City, which, you know, exist in pockets, or like right off the grid in the tunnel or something like that, and evading treatment forever, it may be actually incremental progress if this person is admitted to the hospital, right? In this unique situation, it may be like, finally they're able to come into the hospital and engage in care, and that may be desired at this point in time for this person. Whereas generally speaking, in healthcare, we're trying to reduce hospitalizations, right? They're seen as a negative outcome, and particularly readmissions, right? That's generally for a pop. So the typical healthcare measures don't work at the tails of the curve. And so we're focused really on retention and care, right? The fact that we are able to keep a relationship with this person, and they haven't blown us off completely and shut the door on our efforts. We think that's successful because we believe that relationships, you know, promote healing and growth. That's just what, you know, mental health professionals believe. And so, you know, that is one of them, retention and care. Housing placement is important. While not 100% of the clients are homeless upon entering the program, most are. I guess probably 70, 85% are homeless at the time that they begin their time. And so we want to see forward trajectory. But when a person goes from the street into a safe haven, they are still homeless. And so like an auditor misses that nuance, right? That doesn't come through in an audit. They're still in a homeless category. We think that's progress. The person's come out. They're moved from a safe haven, right? And then they go to an apartment. We've had people with apartments that they don't stay in, right? We get them into an apartment. They're still out on the street. So do you count them as homeless? Do you count them as housed? we're gonna wait it out. We're gonna say, you know what, we're gonna keep this apartment and we're gonna hope she sleeps there tonight or he sleeps there next week or next month, and do the very best we can to not let them lose that place, so that, you know, somebody who's been out doors for a decade, right? It's going to be frightening. They're not thrilled to just move into sort of what you and I would think is like, yes, victory, right? That's maybe more of an incremental progress for them. And so we're looking at general trajectories toward toward housing, reduced time in jail. Certainly jail is always a negative outcome, and engagement. And then beyond that, the goals are really individualized.
I did read through the audit, and again, on this same topic, what I found interesting is that what is being evaluated is not what you're doing. I mean, in other words, it seems to me there's a real mismatch between, yes, the standard questions you have on an evaluation and what your team is trying to achieve. And what seemed quite, maybe it's hard to do this, but if you could document, as you know, when you have a program and it's being publicly funded, you do have to document something, because,
yes,
you know, you can't just say, it is a lot of money, you have to do it. But if you could get the documentation in line with what your actual achievement is, which is maintaining contact and probably improving their life by speaking to somebody. But have that be part of the documentation, so that's part of the evaluation, so that doesn't look so bad when you get an audit. I mean, that was,
yes, totally agreed. And the reason we agree with that, the reason why we agreed with a lot of the audit findings is, like, it was a tiny program. It grew exponentially during a pandemic. And our evaluation results were not ready yet, right? And that's when they audited us, right? So that was bad timing for us, frustrating. I am not concerned. I know, like, because I know how much we have, and I know that we simply need time to complete all the analyses and have time for the biggest cohort of people to be in the program, complete the analyses and publish them. I am confident. I mean, the infrastructure is there for the data collection. The auditors were really focused on medication adherence, which for us is not a primary. That's a great way for people to blow you off and to never meet with them again, as if you're just talking about medication, right? So we were saying, you know what, that's a thing, that's important, but not our first topic of conversation. And so I think there was a misalignment as well with the audit results, but I agree with you. We need to produce a public accounting for the public money.
So what is your plan for that? I mean, you mentioned like you're doing your own auditing, basically. You're doing your own evaluations of the efficacy of the program. How do you do that, and what would the result be? I mean, will you be issuing a public report at some point, or is it an internal document, and how often do you do that? Like,
yeah. I mean, so internally, any program that we contract with, we are, we're collecting typically quarterly data from the providers. Clinical programs always have person level data, right, in terms of just identifying information and whether they're still in the program being served, and then we go out and view the programs. We review their clinical records to just see the notes and to get a taste of the contacts that are happening, to make sure they're using approaches that we think are within our contract scope. And then we can periodically match their identifying information with correctional information, and hospital utilization, and shelter utilization, as well as person level reports and housing status. So we can do that. Point in time information is hard. Isn't great for this, right? So we want to see some sort of housing stability. So typically, with IMT, we're saying, at 1 year and 2 years post enrollment, what is their housing status? And so most of the people who were enrolled at the time of the audit were that bolus, that big cohort of new people that came in. So they had not yet been in the program for that long because of the timing and the growth. And so we will we'll do that. We have, data sharing agreements that are really complicated to set up and maintain, that sometimes slow us down to get homeless and correctional data for the matching.
And housing is further challenged by the fact that you can't produce more housing. So at a certain point, you may come up against a brick wall if there's just not enough housing.
Yes. Yeah, I think the housing affordability crisis is the biggest challenge of all of our work. Even with this group, though, because we have partnered, we can prioritize this group for housing. The challenge is that this group it's not simple. Typically, it's not that they have never been offered an apartment. That's not the reason they're homeless. Typically, there's much more complexity and trauma preventing them, and right from that sticking. I can tell you that there's been many efforts, right? And it's just one of them, and we just need to keep trying, right? And so we do prioritize them and try our very best to match, available apartments and programs with their needs and preferences, and we just keep at it.
Arturo, did you have something you want to say?
I think it kind of just goes back to what Rachel was talking about in terms of having, data and measures of data just to have, I think, to reflect on internally, but also for the public. I think whether you're running an organization, nonprofit, public, private, government, it helps to just know what's going on. And I think when neither the public nor the organization seems to have that data, I think it's really challenging to really understand, like, well, if there are areas for improvement, how do we address those? And if there are areas where we're potentially failing, and maybe it's not the right fit, then maybe that's not the right fit and not the responsibility that we should be undertaking. So just like a second on that, but I guess like looking through the audit, and it kind of goes through metrics, measures of success, data, and then the reviews with like the service providers. I guess like is your organization, is your departments, is there like a plan? I'm not sure if this is later on in the audit. I haven't gotten through all of it, but I'm just kind of curious what the plan is for some of these things going forward.
Yeah, I don't want to make too much of the audit. I understand what you're saying about it. I mean, we're not, which is like it's written at a certain point in time, and it's written from an outside perspective and so on. But one of the things that Arturo is getting at, one of the interesting things to me about the document was that it was shared with you guys, and it sounded like you guys agreed with some of it. And in fact, tonight you're saying the same thing. Like, so I guess my interest, and I think that's what you're trying to get at, is so when will you be evaluating it? How will you be evaluating it? How will you?
Yeah.
And at one point, do you get to have a response to that?
Yeah. So I think in terms of the when, I don't know exactly when the stars will align for all the data sharing agreements and the publication reviews to get out there. I hope, within within the near future. I don't know what that, like a year, that we can get something out there seems reasonable to me. In terms of the how, I think that's, I tried to talk through some of the measures in terms of engagement and housing status, and then in incarcerations. I think there's a lot of, interest in, qualitative analysis. I think those stories are really, compelling for me because they, demonstrate how special the program is, but I think we just don't have a lot of dedicated analytic staff to do the qualitative analysis that we'd like. So there are resource challenges that we face, and so that's the reality.
Conversely, what would have to happen for you to feel that it doesn't work? That with all the good intentions of the world, What would have to happen for you to feel that it isn't effective?
Yeah,
Question, good question.
it's a good question. I think typically I think people vote with their feet, right? And so when people keep coming back for more, that's a good sign. When we have wait lists, it's a suggestion, it's a problem, right? But it's also an indication that something we're doing is seen as valuable for the people themselves or the people around them who are, because we're not interacting directly. I'm a bit removed, right? We're sort of managing the access, but not doing the direct care. And so when clinicians are doing the direct care every day, are saying, the last person that I referred to this program, hasn't been back on my inpatient service, or I saw them and they look great on the street. Like they're coming back to us. And so I think that if nobody's seeking out our service, then we start to realize, well, why do we have this, right? That's when we pull back on programs if they're not, subscribed. If you have a program and nobody's showing up and you've got vacant spots, it's not working.
And what about their providers? Because obviously you're contracted with private providers. You're relying on their efficacy, right? On their doing a good job. And what indications would be for you if that's not working out, if specific providers
Yeah.
not working out?
So that's the I will call it the sort of daily kind of program monitoring that my team does, right? They are out in those programs, observing interactions, reading charts. The programs are coming to them for help, when there's barriers. And so we have eyes on these programs, and there's not that doesn't translate neatly into, published reports, but it's certainly data that I read, letters, communications, case conferences, meetings where we're troubleshooting. And so we're watching the provider's intervention. We can generally tell, from the issues that emerge, if they're doing a good job or not. And we call them out when they're not. We have corrective action plans. One of the initial providers in our demonstration period didn't get an award to continue. They didn't do well, right? We moved on, and so that's our approach. It's hard for us to collate those visits into publishable public reports, and that's a challenge. But I can assure you that work happens. So I feel that there is, we understand how the money is being used, and we think, and we believe, and we are certain it's being used in the interest of these clients, consistent with the scope and the principles outlined in the scope. Because we didn't have these like rigid structures, we had principles of and we see that come through in the interactions.
Yeah, I mean, it must be frustrating because you're dealing with the complexity of human beings, and in a system that, because you're spending money and public money, there is always going to be a question of how to measure things.
Yes.
And it must be complicated, although not impossible, obviously.
Yep.
To measure whatever, benchmarks, progress, quality. Do you think that it's worth the money, this program?
Yes, I do. I think I do. I think we're at a good number now. I'm not advocating to grow for more programs at this point in time. I think we have a pretty good capacity that we have a large cohort of people that we should focus on and support. And so I think that is, I think it's money well spent, and I think that it's sufficient at this point in time.
Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
I'm just curious about your thoughts on staffing. I'm assuming, like everyone else in the world, probably, you have trouble getting adequate, good staff to run these programs. Is that handicapping you? Is it, and does any?
Yeah, I think yes, there is tremendous pressure on the mental health workforce. This work is grueling, It's, I think though, there's something very special about it for the folks who are cut out for this sort of work, really appreciate the flexibility of the model and the lack of pressure for, like, you know, churning through the folks, right? Get them done in and out, right? It doesn't have that vibe. And so I think we do have a pretty good steady workforce. It was hard to staff up during the pandemic, but this model compared to some of the more structured, licensed and billable services is more attractive. So we have a bit of a recruiting edge for this program. But of course, I care about those other programs too. I'm responsible for them as well. So it's hard for me to rob Peter to pay Paul here. But I think the number of teams that we have now are adequately staffed. It'd be hard to go beyond that, though, I think.
You know, I should have said this before, but if anyone among the attendees or panelists has a question, please raise your hand. I mean, in this room, what I mean is it's an invitation to ask questions, not get in line, but please feel welcome to ask questions. Arturo, go ahead.
Hi, Jamie. So going through the audit, obviously this issue is not only like a deeply individual one for the clients that you work with, but it's also like a public facing one, right? And I think that's also part of potentially, you know, the motivation for either the audit or just like you get a lot of eyes on this issue, right? It is really something that is in everybody's face across Manhattan, across the city every day. In the document, they kind of talk about incarceration rates, right, as like a measure. And I think that's historically there was a little bit of motivation, I think, either in the articles that were written about how, well, you know, in some cases there have been cases of violence, right? And that's something definitely that we want to reduce. It affects all the people involved. Are there any other like measures? So like, because I think in the audit and the reporting, and I think the data that you collect, a lot of it is like individual client outcomes. Are there any other measures that you can think of that are maybe a little bit more public facing that you think would communicate the efficacy of your work?
It's a challenge. I think I don't have the answers to that. They're hard to communicate, right? The value of it. So we've looked, for example, at, you know, risk assessment tools. There's, you know, a number of validated risk assessment tools out there, and we've tried to, you know, map them to try to use them in this program to just sort of see a reduction in risk over time. I think the challenge with risk assessment is, even with the validated tools, the research is limited, and most of the variables that inform risk assessments are static, not dynamic. So, for example, you have adverse childhood events, right? You know, family member, you know, murdered, right? We can't change that. We're not able to undo most of those static risk factors through our interventions. And so it's been hard for us in this very small group of people that we're serving relative to, you know, the whole population at this very sort of extreme end, for us to see these risk assessment tools as valid in this subset of the population, because I'll say it colloquially, like the deck is stacked against them. Right? It's already stacked against them. So they're off the charts already in any validated risk assessment tool because of everything that's happened to them in their lives up until now. I'm really like tremendous immigration stories, refugees, like, right. And I'm not talking about the current migrant crisis at all. I'm talking about just sort of general New York City, trauma, violence, family members, you know, victimization themselves repeatedly, right? This is who we want to serve through the program, but it's going to be very hard to use these sort of general scales to show change for them because they're just validated on a population that is not as nearly as extreme in their experiences as this group. So if you have ideas, we're open to them, but the ones that we found to be the most sort of broadly applicable are the housing and incarceration ones and the engagement, and everything else feels so unique.
Yeah, and you say you have a cohort now of about 1,000 people or so, and you're gonna hold on to them. What happens with people who are, you know, turning homeless, turning, you know, starting, what happens to the next generation?
Yeah. There's a little bit of movement, right? So people like since we've had some programs since 2016, people will move on, even though we didn't put an end date, right? People move on, they move out of the state, they pass away, right? There's a variety. So there is new capacity. There is some modest amount of turnover that people can come in. I don't think this isn't the solution for everybody, right? This is a broad, this is a narrow thing. The numbers of folks who are street homeless who might qualify this are, certainly concerning in terms of numbers, but not. I think not all of them necessarily street homeless need equals IMT, right? We have other treatment interventions that can help with that. It's not a perfect solution, but there's some movement in here, but there's other levels of care that can also help with the current generation of potential, new candidates.
I was wondering about that because, you're not just doing IMT, you're doing the whole panoply of tools that DOHMH has. And you're seeing an enormous population with different needs and different levels of need. And so we see people on the street or in a park or doing drugs or ranting on the street, and we don't have a sense of whether there are too many for the system to handle, or do you feel that we are set up? You say that you think that we have enough IMT teams. Is that because it would be too hard to manage more of them, or really for this extreme population, we don't need that many?
Yeah, that's a question I wrestle with a lot. That's sort of my job. Part of it is like figuring out what's the need and the capacity, and so I'm not the last word on this, but there's been a lot of growth over the last 8 or so years of services with IMT, additional ACT teams, shelter partnered ACT teams, forensic ACT teams. Safe options support teams, SOS teams that go out, critical time interventions, crisis residences, faster mobile crisis, and so there's a Connect program, a clinic-based enhancement that we do. I think I feel good about these expansions. I think most of them are, pretty much all of these expansions are now up and running. We're getting to a sort of a critical mass of new innovation that I think is good for now. I think part of it, could we staff more? I don't know if we could staff more, probably not. But also I think it's important to give us time to get this working, right? Because when you're always adding new stuff, it's hard to focus on the existing stuff. So that on the treatment side, I think there's enough growth. It's really substantial over the last 8 years. I'll put the number there. I think that's about right. But the housing intersection is different, right? And so I think that housing affordability in our city is the biggest problem, and it impacts this group of people the most, right? It impacts everybody. It's not just a mental health issue, the affordable housing piece. And so we need, much more affordable housing in the city. Some of it's supportive, some of it just general affordable. And that will alleviate pressure on the healthcare system, which is sort of ends up solving the problems of housing affordability, which is really, in my opinion, an economic and
waste
problem, right? It's not a healthcare problem, but the healthcare system bears the burden of this across the inpatient and outpatient sectors.
So I'll get to Ritu in just a second. So should we have asked for more IMT at CB2, and I think you're going to tell us no, we should not be asking for more IMT. see it as an effective model. You know, it seems promising to us. It seems like a flexible model that doesn't require 10 years of approvals to get it going. And we see so many people that in our neighborhood that seem to be in need. But I think you're going to tell us, well, no, just hold your horses. We got to perfect what we have so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look. I'm not gonna. I'm always gonna say like, yes, we need more money in our mental health care system, right? I think that's important, but I do know that growth can sometimes suck up all the oxygen in the air, and then you're not sort of doing the other stuff. And so we were really focused on growth for a few years, and then we got hit with that audit. And we were like, we did, the results were not ready for the auditors in the time that they wanted to. And so I think, I'm not going to say no, we don't need more, like another team, of course, yes, always, but I'm balancing that out with all these other factors.
Janet, let me just ask, Ritu, you want to say something?
Yeah, this is not grilling you. I just want to know from your perspective, which programs have you found to be more successful, and what can we do as an audience, as communicators and neighbors, do to help your mission and to educate folks that are in our community?
Well, that's a nice question. I appreciate that. I think we've, which programs are most helpful? You mean like a type of program, or specifically which, provider organization?
Well, what do you see as being some of the more successful or programs that, this program seems to be really great with homeless population. This program seems to be really fantastic in forensics,
Yeah.
Are there particular programs that you would recommend that we look at personally or as a community board?
Yeah.
And then with respect to that, I sit on my co-op board. And so one of the questions is, we've got scaffolding going up, and the folks want to know, what can we do to prevent folks sheltering underneath the scaffolding? And so to know how to educate our neighbors, to know what the process might be if we encounter somebody that's in need of help, that's in need of shelter, so that we become, kind of agents for change individually.
So again, appreciate that question. I think that we try to sort of think about the work that we're doing for adults with SMI in sort of 4 spaces, with sort of the healthcare, the mental health care, the treatment services that I've been talking about, the housing, right? And so the treatment stuff we talked about, I think, from my position is, I think we're in a good spot right now. We need to support all the stuff that has recently opened up. The housing stuff, I think, again, the healthcare system gets sort of, the mental health care system often gets blamed for housing affordability crisis, which I think is has it upside down, frankly. And so I think, more housing development and addressing those pressures, and allowing housing development across our city will help the mental health population, because they need places to live, like everybody, and to have their crises out on the street, right, is makes it worse, upsets everybody around them, is just a horrible experience all around. And so we need more housing development, we need more affordable housing development, and then we need sort of community places where people with serious mental illness can hang out, right? Like places you hang out. What?
Drop-in centers.
Yes, and so we have clubhouses, which are a bit more have more of an evidence base and a structure to them than drop-in centers, but are similar in that they're a place for people to go. And so we're opening up a number of them. The closest one to you guys, the closest new one will be on the Lower East Side. So it's not super close to you guys, but that's the only one we have in Lower Manhattan that is already started enrolling some founding members and is a great place for like people to go immediately. So if like somebody's looking for something immediate, right? Like hand them, like bring them to a clubhouse, walk in, right? And say, you know, here's a nice place. That you can get a meal here, and some make a friend, right? And so I think those developing more clubhouses is something we're focused on. There's been a lot of attention to some of the approaches that we've taken through the competitive procurement. No, but so a lot of people, you know, concerned about that. But I think in the end, we'll get to a place where we have, you know, many thousands more people can like go to a setting. So citing those, supporting them, directing people, helping them get there will be helpful. And then the last piece, so I'm talking about like the treatment services, talking about the housing, I'm talking about the sort of community places where people can, you know, hang out and support one another and have a life, right? The last piece is sort of the crisis response. And so we're doing a lot of effort and we appreciate your help sort of promoting 988 and the use of that, right? We're working on the back end to sort of talk with 911 about diversion to 988, but anybody can call 988 any time of day or night to just get a clinical or peer support intervention. And so we want as many non-police crisis interventions as possible. We may need the police sometimes, certainly we rely on them for emergency responses and public safety information, but you know, having people call 988 and promoting the use of that is something we could use your help with.
Great, Janet?
You mentioned, you know, I was gonna actually ask about the housing, and I think that's very important for this group to recognize that these things are so entwined to be supportive of housing.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the clubhouses, or, you know, there's only one, is there only one downtown that would serve our neighborhood? And are you attempting to open up any others?
Yeah, so so there are others. That there's one in Times Square. There's one downtown that's been there for a long time. So the one in Chinatown on Henry Street is like the first brand new one. The one in Times Square will continue. Fountain House that were provided there, so a lot of people remember that name. And then there's a couple in Uptown as well. So people can go anywhere, but they're sort of situated. So, you know, if we can, you know, more money would help us to open more clubhouses. I don't think we've saturated the clubhouse market and clubhouses are actually very lightly staffed. So we don't bump up against those staffing, right? Because the members run the program themselves, which is something really empowering and builds employment skills, right? It's empowering, it forms relationships, like you guys are coming together around a shared purpose. I bet some of you are, you know, become friends through this process, right? Same idea with a clubhouse. And so help with those is probably would be, you know, something we could act on. And I saw a chat, the Lower East Side Clubhouse is being operated by an organization called NIDIS, New York Disaster Interfaith Services. They're a nonprofit. I
think that they run a shelter.
Naming the program right now.
I think they run a shelter for migrants on Grand Street, right? In the Hampton Hotel. I think it's the same people. I'm not sure. Anyways, maybe I'm wrong. Artur, you had a question.
Yeah, so kind of going back to you were talking about how, you know, the IMT program was kind of built out of a need and still addresses the like long tail of people in these kind of situations related to homelessness, substance abuse, serious mental health illness. And so it seems like, you know, we have different programs and resources for folks in different situations. Also, this is like, I've only been on this committee for I think 2 meetings now, so I'm also learning. When you think about, and maybe this is not the right way to think about it, is there like a good or healthy or responsible cost per client that you associate with these different programs or people in these different parts of the bell curve, as you called it?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I think, you know, we don't, it's very hard to figure out the total cost of care given our healthcare system. right? With federal, state, and local money, and jails are city money, state, prison money is state, hospitals, some have state, money, and I don't know that we have yet figured out how to get a true cost of care, given the complexity of our healthcare delivery system, and that there's no like single set of books, right, adding it all up. And so it's hard to make that cost benefit argument, but just certainly, hospitalization and incarceration are exorbitantly expensive. And so time in the community is I think we assume that is savings. But the exact calculations are, we don't have, I don't know that anybody has the health economist who can figure that out.
So interesting.
And maybe that's, that's fair, right? Like a lot of money gets put into these programs from different sources. 45 million is the number that.
No, well, 45,000 in the audit, and I'm sorry to keep citing the audit, but that's my source of information. They cite that this program costs about $45,000 a client. Now, to me, that seems like a lot of money. I don't know what to compare that to.
Yeah,
is that a lot of money, or
You go to the hospital
and
for
so
a week,
just-
you're out $45,000.
just to continue on that point, right? Like, I don't know that that's a big number, a small number, or what all the other numbers are in, but I think if, the organization is to make a case that 45K per client is a small number relative to X savings that you were mentioning, right? Incarceration or other measures of success. Like, I'm just kind of asking questions that come to mind, not because I needed a number, but I think these are all that for the public to kind of be assuaged and made felt better about our investments in the space and that they're actually working, that having those numbers, I think, goes a long way. So that is something I would encourage, that if it could be found, if it is possible, I think it would help a lot.
there must be some.
Those arguments are compelling.
And there must.
I will have to wrap up soon because I have the babysitter book through 7:30.
Yeah, I think we're done unless anybody else has. Thank you so much for your time on this. Thank you for answering difficult questions, whether they're challenging or complicated. And of course, thank you for the work that you do. You describe this as your life work, and I think we're all very grateful that you do this. So
thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. It's good for me to hear from your community as well. So thank you for your work on behalf of the community.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay. Good night. So we're going to say goodbye to Jamie. We're going to go into business session. We'll still record, but we won't take any questions. And I guess what I want to ask is, do we want to pass a resolution on this?
I don't know if you need a resolution or not. I think we should add the clubhouse.
We should what?
We should add the clubhouse to our request.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that we have to do it
Yeah.
for this year, but we can.
Yeah.
I mean, it aligns with.
We already approved the requests.
Yeah, but I also think like we could certainly have a meeting about clubhouses.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you think we should open more clubhouses and try to get one in the West Village?
Well, at least discuss it a little more. That sounds like a low cost way to help engage people.
It's
mean, it-
it's
it'll be
something that Eric Botcher has been really focused on. And he's been very supportive of, just so you guys know. I've been to a clubhouse, not in New York, but someplace else. And they're really fascinating because part of the staffing comes from some of the clients. So they,
That's what you're saying.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, and the other part I liked about hearing was that it is very nice every now and then. This is the only time I've heard it in a public space where there's a plea for treating people like people and engaging with them, and that their lives are probably better simply because they spoke to somebody a few times this week. And I would not want to get that thrown out because of a cost benefit analysis that doesn't acknowledge the human touch.
Yeah, it's tricky.
It's tricky, but
It's a lot of money, but
There are limits.
Well, we're a very wealthy city. And
Yeah.
we spend a lot of money in a lot of other places that probably dwarfs this.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
it's not a lot when in the scheme of things.
Well, first of all, we are not in a position to do
No, we're not.
cost benefit.
Yes, yeah.
We have no way of having expertise on that, and but not even, and neither can James do that. So it's not, we have to refrain from that anyway. I think it is an interesting question about how you measure
Exactly.
success and or
Exactly.
failure. It's tricky, you know, it's not.
I think that
Not to
audit,
just
that
be nice.
audit showed it. I mean, it was very tricky.
It raised good questions, I thought, and I didn't mean to focus on it too much, but I think you gotta start somewhere as a conversation. But so do we wanna, I mean, we don't need, we could have a resolution if we wanted it, that cited the audit and recognized that the timing of the audit, you know, that recognized the response that we've heard from the audit and noted that, you know, DOHMH is saying that part of the issue was the timing of the audit and the expansion of the program, rapid expansion, at a specific time, and that we would like to see documentation as it becomes clear of the efficacy of the program. I would like to be able to say that.
No, I think.
Maybe I don't know.
I don't see it as a resolution.
You don't see it as a what, as a
As a
resolution?
resolution.
Just as a letter, a
Just
statement.
a little bit of-
Well, a letter or a statement is
Or,
a
yeah,
resolution, I mean, right? I mean, it's,
Resolutions get passed by everybody, and they're gonna wonder, what is this? You know, I don't know why, and where does that go? What is it? Is
I think for our
somebody-
group, we can keep an eye on it. We can come back to this and see where they,
yeah, there's no institutional memory for that, though. I mean.
no, this is just beyond this
We'll all be
group.
different people in 2 years, you know what I mean?
Uh,
I mean, we don't have to come out and say something
Yeah.
about this. I mean, certainly we don't have a quorum to pass anything.
Feels a little late just because the audit was in February. We already passed the full board budget priorities. But I do agree that it's something that we should stay on top of.
I mean, I think that it's fair to ask if a program like this works. I think that's a fair
Exactly.
question.
I mean, I thought, I have no idea if it works. I think it could be a waste of time.
but the other thing,
And I thought, how do we judge that?
Well, they have to do a better job of evaluation.
Right.
I think they should do it.
And they are saying that
They're
that is
working on
part of
that.
their plan.
So
So
really,
I don't have a
we
problem.
believe her, that's really, I mean, I thought it's a matter of her being able to say, I understand what you're saying and this, but she was not that clear a communicator. So,
Can I chime in here, Keen, though? Can I just say that the government has mandated throughout the healthcare system to start using value-based care for insurance reimbursements. And the one area where they have been unable to even begin to address what that's going to look like is in mental health care, because there aren't readily available metrics that you can use to measure progress.
I think that's fine. I guess what I'm saying is, look, we have said we endorse this program, we'd like more of it, and so on. I don't think it's unfair to say in a resolution that questions have been raised about the efficacy. We understand that DOHMH has been in the process of rapid expansion, it's getting its bearings, and that it has a commitment to monitoring the program and ensuring that it, you know, whatever, that there's ways of measuring benchmarks and monitoring it and so on. I mean, does anyone care if we say that or not? I don't know.
I mean, she acknowledged herself, I mean, part of the problem with this evaluation was there was a mismatch between sort of whatever they were trying to measure and what the program itself wants to measure. And she was able to say there were three things. They looked at housing, incarceration rates, and one other factor, and engagement. So let them say how they measure themselves. You know, if they want to come up with a different set of metrics than what the controller.
It sounded like though they also just had a missing data issue, and even though you don't need to have like a definition of success, I think it would be at least be useful if you had like a time series data of like, here are the clients that we had in this month, this was their outcome or statement this month, which might be missing, and then having that.
That's the whole thing, though. The question is, what is the outcome? Define an outcome, any outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if this is a multi-million dollar, if I'm spending $45,000 a year for a person of my taxpayer money so that he can have a friend to check in with, I don't know if that's money well spent. I'm being contentious here on purpose. I'm devil's advocate. If I am
I
paying
just
that
think it's a little,
bill and he's taking his medicine,
I mean,
that's definitely market.
also, these are like, I work in statistics and data and on this all the time. And I think it's really easy for people to say, oh, this is complicated, and then throw their hands up. And I think these are professionals, and it's their profession to generate data and metrics that measure success. Like, I think they have to sit down and come up with something, but saying this is complex and I don't have anything, I don't think that's acceptable.
I agree with you.
Well, and she said herself. But she said,
I told them how to do it, but they have to do something.
Yeah, and she said the same thing, right? She said, we're waiting, there was so much change in the program.
And so
We
much
can't
growth,
really
yeah.
measure it. Now we have a group that's kind of a stable capacity, and now we follow it and measure it. And I would like to say we support that, and we would like to see the results.
We
of
just like to see, yes, we'd like to see it as they
Yeah, as it
document their
becomes
efforts and they do
available,
it,
right.
yeah.
But do you guys feel that that should not be a resolution? I would like to see it as a resolution, but I'm not the only person.
What's the goal?
The goal is that, as political
The goal
document,
is
To have a record, kind of a record.
our goal in writing a resolution would be to signal to the department that it's not enough to just, say that it makes you feel good, that we want to see, when you get it, we want to see how it's working.
Yeah, no, I think it's okay to say as she agreed. I mean, I said any public, ever using public has to document something. I mean, there's not,
Right.
you're not gonna go forever not doing that, although some people do, of course. No, I think it's okay to ask for that, and if you make a resolution, you're saying whoever is on this committee next year, it would be something to refer to, that we do want to go back and ask them again how their documentation is going.
And if, like, for example, crazy, let's say we discover next year that the entire program was marked with corruption and it was a sham and it was stealing the city money. I'm not saying that that's happening. I'm just going to a logical conclusion. We will have raised the question that we would like to see documentation that it works, which I think is a responsible position.
I kind of am leaning towards that a little bit more now, because that was in February. Now we're in November. And I think there was a little bit like uncertainty when we asked her when this might come by. And I would have thought maybe a year from the audit would be reasonable. Maybe that's not reasonable.
Yeah, no.
Maybe a year from
She
today.
said a year from, within the year is what she meant.
Yes.
Oh, so
So I
then,
think that's.
Yeah, so if we come back in a year and say that we like to, yeah.
So shall I draft a resolution? And if I do along those terms, do you guys feel comfortable with it? It's not an official vote because we don't have a quorum. We would bring it to whatever. I'll ask what the process is. I've never understood it.
I think I would also just lean towards trying to make it like less contentious and maybe not
Oh, of course
so
not.
audit heavy.
We're just
you know, 'cause I feel
interested
like-
in seeing the results of
Yeah.
their pulling together.
Yeah.
We'd like to see their evaluation work match their whatever.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. I agree with you. I don't think we're.
Yeah, no, this
there.
is supportive.
These are people, I mean, committed to the benefit of our beings. It's a.
I think at one point, was it Greenwich House or somebody was looking for help in putting out a report and collecting statistics. And I hooked them up with somebody at the Mailman School of Public Health. And they had a graduate student who came in and looked at the data and did a report for them. And I don't know how the Department of Mental Health works in the city, if they can have somebody come in, like writing their thesis on collecting data and writing a report for them.
Well, having
But that-
taken a one-person program evaluation, it is hard. Program evaluation is
It's
time
very,
consuming and
very
expensive.
hard.
The health commissioner has resigned, he's leaving at the
I
end
know.
of this year.
Ashwin, whatever we,
Ashwin, he was from Fountain House.
he was from.
So otherwise, commissioner, if we had a commissioner who was gonna stay through and was creative, they might be interested in something.
But
Well, it's possible, I mean, I don't think we'd have to go to the commissioner level. It's possible that she could bring
Yeah.
somebody in on a semi-volunteer basis.
I'm sure, they have to
They have to find their way.
test and prove their theory all the time, right? Proof of concept all the time. I'm sure they're well experienced in how to do that. I buy what she's saying, which is that don't worry too much about the audit because there were so many other factors going on. That seems great to me.
Made sense to me.
I think she acknowledged, even in the audit, they agreed with a lot of it, and she acknowledged, this is, now we can start to look at the program itself. And I think,
Yeah.
I would like to see the results of that one
Yeah.
come out. I'd like to know that it's money well spent, so.
Well, I would just like to say that I was not impressed at all with what she said.
Oh, really?
Really.
Tina, of all the people, Tina was.
No, I mean, it sounded too bushy to me.
No, she was not a good communicator and she doesn't do her service, good service for that, but possibly.
I'm just gonna,
Sorry.
oh, no, that's fine. I think, I feel like maybe I put her on the spot.
She has, she has
Right.
opportunities to speak.
I thought she was communicating really well.
You think-
Yeah, I think she was.
I thought she was communicating really well.
Yeah,
She shared a lot of information with us.
Yeah, but if you've been running that place for 15 years, to be more politically aware, I think, in a sense.
Well, anyway,
It's a tough job, let's say.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm glad she isn't,
Yeah.
because then she's probably nice with the
I was at something in NYU where they were making a presentation about the chronically homeless in this program. It's very interesting. The woman said that our population of people who are difficult is actually in 20 or 30,000 or something like 20 or 30,000, but that number has not shifted like year over year. Like it's a very fixed number of people who have chronic mental illness.
Oh, mental illness. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of like the number of
Actually, homeless has gone
Unhoused.
up.
Unhoused, yeah.
unhoused. I don't
And
know,
there's a,
not that much.
I don't know. And then,
no, I feel like the last couple of years it's
goes
gone
like
up.
Not in the shelters.
drugs.
Outside.
No, I mean, on the
Outside.
streets,
Crack
running into people's
epidemic.
Oh.
streets. the last 5
You
years.
know what, I haven't looked.
Then we have a fentanyl epidemic.
I don't know the numbers, but I just feel like I see more,
For the homeless.
I feel like I see more people.
I should look, and it looks like.
Totally,
And then our
Now.
police.
The other thing that's interesting to me is that, remember them talking about the 50, who was it that was telling us about this? Was it Brian Stedman, someone? There is a meeting at, is it the DOH or, I can't even remember now. But heads of agencies or heads of an agency, they get together regularly and talk about the 50 most difficult cases.
About what?
The 50 most difficult.
Oh, that's interesting.
50 people who are the most
Yeah.
sort of intractable cases of
Mhm.
that confluence between substance use, mental illness, and homelessness. And like, there is a known
number.
50 people.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe because 50 people, because they don't have the capacity to talk about 75 of them, but I mean, it's just interesting.
And how many resources go into helping that group, but they have a huge impact on everybody themselves.
And they're fair questions to ask, $45,000 on a person. Okay, that's a lot of money. What if I just gave them 45, I mean, obviously I'm asking a simplistic question, but I mean, say, well, what else could I do that for?
Right.
Yes, there are.
I think that's really the question is like, is this the best use? And if not, like, what would be an alternative strategy to help try to solve this?
I think they're on the right path.
I think
Yeah, I
this particular cohort, I don't know what else much.
I thought also she really was good at explaining, remember, this is the tail of the bell curve, and she sees it all, right? So this is the tail. It's not appropriate for everybody.
I also appreciated that she just answered her questions and wasn't too evasive.
No,
It wasn't always completely at the level
Wasn't
of detail
spinning
I would have
us.
liked.
Gosh, I didn't
but
know. Yeah, I
She
didn't.
was responsive.
It's probably, I know we don't have our quorum, but it's nice having a smaller group too, I think.
It is, yeah.
Comfortable.
All right, I'm gonna end this meeting, guys. Thank you all.
Well,
Thanks.
And the
Good to see
meeting
you too.